Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So this is session 6 of Beyond Eye Making. And last time I finished off the last 2 of the 4 stages of eye making: identification and self-use, with a special explanation of the 5 groups of grasping, 5 life functions which I identifies with. And before I finish that section, I should mention one little comment. I didn't say very much about another very important teaching of the Buddha, except I mentioned it in passing, about conditional causality, sometimes explained as, in more a formal way, as dependent origination. It's really the whole foundation of the Buddha's teachings. I mentioned it in the context that was the source of his awakening, contemplating the causes of things, the cause of suffering, and then going back to find out the root in ignorance. But because the formal explanation has 12 links to it, it's a bit complicated to explain all the links. And it is, not really, the process of eye making is not really that central to it. I mean, it's foundational, but not central to it. And so for those who are interested, they can consult my book. I have a whole chapter, a lengthy chapter on it, if you want the real message. But anyway, just mention that it's very important teaching. It goes right through, not only was it the source of Buddha's awakening, but it goes right through all of his teachings. Right from the Four Noble Truths, suffering has a cause, understand the cause, you can remove the cause and suffering ceases. Right down to the whole basis of spiritual practice, because there is causes and conditions for everything except Nibbana. Once we understand the causes and conditions, we can change them, work on them. So as much as you feel your meditation is hopeless, there is possibility to change. Some people have more work to do than others, but there is hope. So the next theme for the next few sessions is the third part, the cessation of eye making. And just to keep some kind of consistency, what I'll do is go through the 4 stages, but in reverse. Before it was how eye making was made from the subtle level of the underlying dispositions up to the coarsest level of self-views. And now for the cessation, I go the opposite. From the coarse level of self-views right down to the most subtle level. So by then your mind should be so prepared you should be able to get the subtle levels, hopefully. Yeah. Start off with the coarse level first. And probably by now you've realized, after understanding how eye making is created, just how insidious, know that word? How all-encompassing eye making is. Because we're born with it, it's an underlying disposition, we're born with eye making, so it's right there in the background. And then we build our whole life around that process, eye making. All of our thoughts, all of our actions are based on I, self-referencing. So just having an intellectual understanding of it doesn't go all the way. It's a good foundation, gives some idea of the the complexity of it, but also the possibilities and the diversity. Eye-making is so diverse in our life. It's not just a thought in our mind. That's what we could be aware of first of all, or easily enough, I think. Did anybody try the exercise I mentioned about noticing with sense impressions, sense contact, the arising of I? Yeah, it's there quite a bit, isn't it? Yeah. But not only that, but it is the whole nature of our actions too are based on self-making. So in order to the Buddha realized this, of course, he realized the very basis of I-making right down to the pre-birth level. We're born with that, so we already have a underlying disposition. Even a young baby, before they're even have any kind of a consciousness of self, they still have this underlying disposition. So the Buddha had a clear enough mind to be able to see this even clearer, even to so-called past lives, previous existences. So he realized how comprehensive this was. So he outlined a comprehensive path of spiritual practice for us to follow that ideally, if you follow it correctly, should affect all these different levels of our being. There is the intellectual level, there's the emotional level, and say there is the somatic level of the body. The young child doesn't have a conceptual mind yet, a conceptual thought, but it still has somatic impressions. Still senses cold and heat and hunger and thirst, but it's not it's not conceptual yet. Just as we can say it's at a cellular level. So if you can bring your awareness down to the cellular level, it's possible. With developing more body awareness, you can sense the body at a very, very, very fundamental level. But the Buddha also realized, this affects our being at all different levels. So this comprehensive path of practice, only once in the explanation, in the references to I-making, was this comprehensive path mentioned. Normally the Buddha just gave a very, very short, succinct explanation how, like one paragraph, how to realize the cessation of I-making. One paragraph. That's all we need. Well, some of them needed anyway, because he was mostly talking to very advanced disciples. So they didn't need a lot of preliminaries. They already had probably a very good grounding in spiritual practice. And then they had this question finally after years, decades of practice, how to realize the end of this I-making now. The Buddha just had to give a very short, succinct teaching. But at one time he gave it was a reference to a more sustained or more comprehensive path of practice, which hopefully you read yesterday, right? In the reading, yes, yeah. So I'll go through it. So it's also mentioned in a number of places in the Pali Canon, not just in this one reference, that somebody hears the Buddha's teaching, they gain faith in it, and then they realized, that living the lay life is not easy to complete the spiritual path of practice. So then they undertake the monastic lifestyle. Say they shave their head and put on the orange robe and go forth from from the home life to homelessness. That's already half of you, almost. Sound familiar? Yes, anyway. Then they undertake the keeping of the precepts. I wouldn't say this is kind of step by step. Very likely, as a layperson, they're already keeping the basic 5 precepts, maybe even the renunciant ones. But it just goes on, these having to explain it in this way, it comes across as kind of like, separate stages, but they're probably all integrated. So first of all, they undertake the training of the moral precepts, refraining from killing and stealing, and celibacy, and then they take on the renunciant precepts, refraining from eating in the evening, refraining from the entertainments and beautification of the body. And then once they have, it goes on quite refined, quite refined aspects of one's life. Then they practice contentment, santuti, contentment with, for the monastic, the 4 basic requisites: alms food, rag, robe, shelter of a tree, and natural medicine. Then they take on the guarding the doors of the senses. And in various ways that's mentioned. I mean, the main one is that to put a guard at the senses to be able to notice the impact, the contact, what the effect of the contact is from the senses to the mind. Yeah, maybe you recall my discussion about contact as one of the stages of sense perception. Basically, what the senses contact has a very powerful effect on the mind. I'm sure you've noticed already, living in a forest place, a quiet forest monastery, is conducive to calmness of mind. Whereas going out to a busy, urban area, especially a shopping area or something rather, yeah, right? You recognize that yesterday? Yes. Yeah. The mind is still shopping. Run out of money, maybe. So one gains some appreciation of the benefit of a wholesome environment. And one of my experiences, just to put a little story here, have I got time? Yes. When I was wandering in Thailand, one of my wandering tours, I went to various monasteries. And just to show the effect of even an environment. Different monasteries have a different environment. Even these were forest monasteries, but some are. The first one I went to was near a busy road. It was a little bit close to the village. I think when it was first founded by Lumpu Chop, it was in the forest. But then, of course, modernization, the village built up and then it got surrounded by the village. So it was all right, but it wasn't very quiet. So I went to another place, but a bit remote, further to the west. And that was all right. It was in a little bit of a scrubby forest, and it was nothing exciting, but good enough. Yeah. And even though there was hardly any trees there, but they had quite a big open hall. I could do walking meditation inside and keep out of the sun. You see. But nothing special. I went to the next place, a little more remote, more quiet, more basic. I had a grass roof bamboo hut, and the food was basic. The senior monk there, he came from Bangkok, so he was really paranoid about food poisoning. So when we collected our food, he put everything in one big pot and had the young boy there cook it all up, boil it. Everything, one big stew. And it was delicious. I mean, fish, meat, vegetables, everything just in one big pot, one big stew in your bowl. It was quite tasty. But we got a little time here. One story, one time though, I was eating this, and then I crunched this bone. And as I pulled the bone out, I said, "We can't eat this. It's a snake. It's a snake bone." And he said, "Let me see that." He said, "Good." I said, No, it's okay." He said, "Just a lizard," he said. It's a lizard tail. He said, "Okay, it's edible." You never know what's in this thing. Better I didn't know, actually, because it was just tasty, that's all. It's just a perception, isn't it? I mean, if you didn't know that, Like I didn't know that, so I didn't really care, but then it kind of shocked me, and I thought, am I gonna, well, it was still tasty. I mean, so what? I mean, it's allowable, it's tasty, it nourishes the body, So, but anyway, at this place, I had this walking meditation path, and it was right next to the trees, I guess for shade. So I do walking meditation there, but walking meditation back and forth and back. The mind would just not be quiet. Just blah, 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 blah. Thinking of lizard tails and whatever. But anyway, it just wasn't quiet. So, in somewhere in the scripture, the Buddha says, if you go to a place and even they have wonderful food, but your mind isn't peaceful, better leave. You need to find a place that's suitable to your temperament, and suitable for peace of mind. And even though you stay in a place where the food is, or the requisites are very hard to come by, but your mind is very peaceful, you should stay there. So anyway, my mind wasn't peaceful, so I went to the next place. And it wasn't too bad. But eventually I went high up in the mountains, and I came to this place, and it was a beautiful, huge banyan tree, and a walking path underneath it, and a view down the valley. And I thought, I can't meditate here. I'll be looking at the view all the time. But I went there to do walking meditation, and the mind just really peaceful. I realized, my interpretation was that somehow my mind needs lots of space. That's why I have a kuti up on the hill, you see. I don't do too well in caves unless it's very hot. Nice cool cave is, nice when it's cool. When it's very hot, you see. Yeah. But anyway, but each different place has a different environment, and we have all different temperaments. So sometimes it's you're, even though you don't even know your temperament, but you find out that somehow it just doesn't suit you in this place or something or other. Even though it can be, a busy monastery, or had many, many monks there, or some Ajahn was enlightened there, but this isn't right for you, So after guarding the doors of the senses, then they develop sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. Then the practice of collectedness, the jhanas. And then they contemplate the Four Noble Truths and the asavas, the outflows. So this is a very shortened version, and it's very comprehensive. Not everybody maybe develops all the jhanas, for example, and maybe their idea of contentment is not strictly as like living at the root of a tree. Some people need a nice, comfortable kuti with a stove in it. For my temperament. So anyway, this is a general outline of the path of practice. The Buddha realized the benefit of that. And a shortened version, of course, is the Eightfold Path. The right view, right aspiration, right speech, action, livelihood, and then right energy, mindfulness, concentration, or collectedness. So you can see that some of those factors are already included in the Eightfold Path. But especially what is extra to it is right view and right aspiration. The intention behind it, right intention. So another aspect of the path of practice, which is not specifically mentioned here, but the Buddha emphasized it many times, the practice of generosity. And I find that in the West, that's very important to emphasize that, because many of us don't realize the effect of generosity. We get very kind of obsessive about our practice. We get very self-focused on our practice, and you can say, oh yes, we're practicing very diligently, doing meditation practice, but there isn't that openness of heart, that ability to relinquish, renunciation. Like right aspiration, one of the factors of right aspiration, samma sankappa, is renunciation. You hardly ever hear it mentioned in meditation practices, renunciation. It's all about, me getting samadhi, me getting, more hours of practice. But a fundamental aspiration is renunciation, giving up, letting go, surrendering. It's the whole basis of the Buddhist teachings. I mean, if you can really, the simplest way of practice is surrender. Let go of your grasping of a self. Huh? Okay, finished. Throw you over. If you can do that. But in little ways, we practice generosity. We let go a little bit of things we normally identify as ours, including our time and our energy, and then so we come to the details of this. Morality, I mean, you're pretty aware of morality. There's the moral precepts and the renunciant precepts. And it's not immoral to have supper in the evening, but it is a renunciant precept, say, training in renunciation, of contentment, just to simplify our life and not get caught up with, another bombardment of the senses, of eating, 3 times a day, So, but it's something which, especially in the West, some people find it difficult to refrain from nutriment in the evening, nourishment. That's why we have so many allowables. But it's mainly to sustain your energy level, you see. The Buddha realized that too, because some of the monks, they got sick in India, so the Buddha allowed these certain medicines. We call them tonics. The tonic medicines, like honey, for example. Honey and ghee and oil and sugar. And of course, there aren't always medicines now in the West, so we have chocolate and cheese. And contentment, it's also something we don't hear too much about in the West, but to simplify your life and just have less things to worry about, like having less things in my hut, for example, in my kuti, there's less things to worry about, less things to have to dust and take care of and things. Yeah. Sense restraint, I already mentioned a lot about that already, sense restraint. But on a more refined level, this sense restraint is that not to be led into looking at the details, into the details of the sense impressions. You see, we just recognize, okay, they have an effect upon our state of mind, yeah, but not be led into kind of the specifics about it, whether it was beautiful or not beautiful or whatever, attractive or. Sati Sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension, training in that. Developing the absorptions, collectedness. Mostly it's mentioned in terms of these 4 absorptions. First absorption, kind of deep levels of collectedness. But of course, before that, there was other levels of concentration, we say. There's appana and upachara. Appana is pre-jhana collectedness or calmness of the mind. And different ajahns have different opinions how much calm you need. When I asked Ajahn Chah how much, samadhi we need, he just says, calm enough, which was a bit frustrating because if you would have said 1, 2, 3, 4th jhana, okay, I could have understood, but he said just enough. But the wisdom of that is, the whole point of collectedness is that the mind reaches a level where it's composed, purified, cleansed, passionless, without defilements, supple, workable, steady, imperturbable. And that's not the end. That's only a first stage, you see. Stage of collectedness, calm, you see. And when it is supple and workable, then you direct it to the contemplation, vipassana, contemplation of the 4 Noble Truths and these outflows, which are very, very basic sources of grasping, of eye grasping, eye making. The three outflows: sensuality, existence, ignorance. So, I mean, when you contemplate ignorance, that's a big theme coming up next time. And in this Vipassana meditation, contemplation, it says that one should, in various places in the Pali Canon it's mentioned, to make a thorough investigation or engage in an inner exploration of dukkha. Dukkha, I left it untranslated, but it has several different, two main translations. First of all, dukkha is a feeling, just one of the basic feelings, basic of the three feelings: dukkha, sukha, and then neutral. So I translated it in that sense as unpleasant. I think Bhikkhu Bodhi is translated as painful, but not every time. I would say it's not all the time that it's actually overtly painful, but just unpleasant. Like when it's a bit cool, it's not really painful, is it? Well, it depends how sensitive you are to cold, but it can be unpleasant. See, so it's general feeling I just translated, and it kind of fits in well with pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. You see, and sukha, dukkha, or neutral. You see, but on the level of the Four Noble Truths, dukkha is, I would say, defined more like imperfection. What the Buddha said was sappe sankhara dukkhang. So all conditioned things are dukkha. See? Well, like, for example, this clock here is a conditioned thing, but the clock isn't feeling unpleasant feeling, is it? Isn't suffering. I don't think. I can't talk to clocks, but it's not a sentient being, you see. But it is dukkha. So it doesn't. You have to change your definition of dukkha to imperfect. All conditioned things are imperfect. They're unsatisfactory. They're imperfect because they will eventually break down. They're impermanent and will break down, and then you will suffer. If you don't realize that, if you don't realize this clock is imperfect, then when it breaks down, you're going to suffer. Disappointment, frustration, whatever. Yeah. So at the level of the Four Noble Truths, dukkha means imperfection or unsatisfactoriness. So it means this, and in the definition of dukkha, as many of you have probably chanted many times, jatipi dukkha, jarapi dukkha, it's very, very comprehensive. Not only, it means hard for us maybe to know that birth is suffering, unless you're a mother. No, but leaves all the men out, I guess. Unless they hear the screams of their wife. But jarapi dukkha, old age is dukkha, yes, I know that. Death, I don't know, not yet. But it's this not getting what you want, being associated with what you dislike. It's sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. So it covers a whole range of all kinds of unpleasantness in life, you see. But the Buddha is, he's encouraging us to make a thorough investigation of it, which is easier said than done. However, if the mind is composed and purified and supple and workable, the mind is not so reactive. And most of us have a whole history of very unskillful relationship with dukkha. We haven't been able to handle it properly. That's why we're here right now, isn't it? Yeah, looking for a way out, looking for a cure. So we have a whole memory or a whole history of unskillful relationship with dukkha. But if your mind is more calm and composed, then you can look at dukkha and the mind doesn't go into its reactiveness. The old memories, the old patterns we've developed, negative patterns dealing with dukkha, don't come up, ideally. So you can look at it with a fresh eye, if you like. And then developing more mindfulness of the body and the feelings. Yeah, the feelings include pleasant and unpleasant, as well as the bodily feelings, the mental feelings, states of mind. And when you investigate them, make a thorough investigation, you begin to see the whole range of how dukkha expresses itself. And the background result of that is you begin to see the pattern. Dukkha has a cause. It's not just pops into existence out of the blue. It has a cause. The cause is craving, right? Craving is another big topic, as I mentioned, about identification. Craving, grasping, and then there's all kinds of association with craving. The desire and the delight in it, and there's all kinds of like affection and preference and all these things. But by studying it, you get a very deep understanding of the nature of dukkha. And some of it, I would say very simply, when you can just turn your attention to it and look at it, a lot of it is just made up out of your own ignorance, really. Like for example, I used to worry about, to try and I had lots of memories of the past, mistakes in the past. I find myself trying to, correct them. What a waste of time. It's too late. Can't change it. No. Fortunately, I came to the monastic life pretty young, so I didn't make too many mistakes. But I got time for it. But no, maybe I shouldn't talk about my mistakes. No. But other times it was, just memories coming up, having to deal with memories, and there's always some kind of association there. I remember, being in Thailand one time doing walking meditation, and I smelled the lemon blossoms. I looked around. I stopped and looked around, and no lemon trees here. What was that? And then suddenly the memory of being in Cyprus in the springtime came to me. And Cyprus has lots of lemon trees. If you get there in the springtime, the whole island just smells of lemon blossoms. You see? And it was just everywhere you go. But it was so vivid. And when you're there, I hardly noticed it because it was so subtle in the background. But here it was in Thailand, and it was this very vivid memory of it, memory of a scent. They say that the smell sense goes the deepest into the brain. It goes directly to the brainstem. It doesn't bypass your conceptual brain. It goes right to the. Whereas seeing and hearing music passes the cerebral cortex. Is that right? Yeah. Just feeling, sanya, and then anyway. But then this memory comes up, and then, oh yes, right, reliving it, and I remember one memory I had when I was there. I think I left my raincoat there I slept under an olive tree somewhere in a field, and then I left my raincoat there. Of course, you don't need raincoats in Cyprus in the springtime if it rains anyway. But coming from Vancouver, you always carry a raincoat with you, So I carried this all over Europe, all the way through Israel to Cyprus, and it was really heavy. And what do I got this here for? Lightening my load. So anyway, when we investigate dukkha, we come to the source of dukkha, craving. And we get some now, it's not just an intellectual understanding. This one word craving, is really loaded, right? The one word dukkha, the one word unsatisfactoriness is really loaded. It's a whole life experience there. Yeah? But when we investigate it, we get some sense for it. Ideally we don't just react to it in our old way, running away from it again. Now we have some calmness of mind, some clarity of mind. We can investigate it more clearly and see it as it really is. And sometimes we recognize, it's just caused by wrong way of thinking, Trying to revive the past, planning for the future, wasted time. So you just drop it, let it go. And then the suffering is reduced. Yeah. Accordingly, we realize cessation then. Once you recognize the cause of this suffering, you can release it, and we realize cessation. And then we're back to the Eightfold Path again for the next session of dukkha. The more subtle level, ideally, So we've been to peel back these different layers of dukkha, if you like. And some people, I would say, they have a very thick skin. Those who have a lot of suffering in life, they've got to peel back lots of layers. Yeah, but the more you peel back, the more sensitive you are, and the more light you are too. Just like the onion. Maybe you peel it off the rough layers, and it gets lighter and lighter, and smaller, and maybe it smells more stronger. And then bringing the contemplation, the investigation to these really fundamental sources of grasping: sensuality, existence, and ignorance. But I'll go into those a bit more detail when it comes to identification. So after this Buddha giving us some guidelines for a comprehensive path of practice, then we can investigate more deeply some of these sources of I-making. As I mentioned, I'll start with the coarser ones first. Remember, I think it was only the last session I talked about self-views, right? That was the last stage of I-making, self-views. So the cessation of self-views. First of all, I don't know if you realize it or not, when you heard about self-views, just how much views condition us, having views about things. Not only, like I mentioned about this visually, living in a very, conducive environment, for example, has an effect upon our mind, but we have opinions, views and opinions. And some of these have been deeply rooted in us since the time we were, very young and gone to school, and our parents, and these prejudices and biases and opinions and views about things. But they have a very strong effect upon our way of relating to reality too. But it's only a view. You have to keep it in mind, it's only a view. Just like a visual view, I think I would say, a comparison to just having a view there. So you look that way and you see a certain sight, and you maybe have some opinion. I gave the story last time, didn't I, about, if I just see that, I just think, oh, Australia is only tea trees, bushy tea trees. I don't see any eucalyptus trees out there at all. Somebody says, no, Australia, lots of eucalyptus trees. I don't see any. I never see them. And then we can go to war over it. You're a liar. And we can laugh about it, but it is views that are the cause of wars. Political and religious views can become wars. You don't understand. It's only a view, only one way of seeing things. You grew up in a certain way. You have certain ideas, certain education, certain conditioning, have certain friends, and you get those views. And you go somewhere else, and you get a different view. And because I had the good fortune to travel quite a bit to different countries in the world. I remember when I went first from Canada to Europe, and I was seeing everything through Canadian eyes in Europe. This is good, that's bad, this is stupid, why don't they speak English here rather than German? We have better food in Canada. For 6 months, I realized I was just seeing it through Canadian eyes. And then one day I woke up and realized, hey, this is not Canada. This is Europe. Totally different environment, different culture, not that much different actually, till I went to somewhere like, I think Greece was a real shock. I couldn't read the signs anymore. They're in Greek, triangles and epsilons and betas and stuff. And I met some students, and I finally got the alphabet from them, so I could, roughly translate, to find a restaurant. No, but the Buddha he kind of went through, he tried to explain, originally like the outflows are only three, very, very basic ones, the sensuality, existence, and ignorance. But then it seems later there's a fourth one, views were added. Because I guess when the Buddha was teaching, he began to recognize there's so many views and opinions around. There was 6 different heretical teachers apparently, all a range of different views. I mean, some were fatalists, and some were determinists, and some were agnostics, and then there was the Brahmins and the Jains, and oh my gosh, a whole range of. And people come to him and ask him. They're really confused. Say, this teacher teaches this. The teacher, who's right? So the Buddha said it's just views. And he gave this one analogy, told the story of a king in a past time, who assembled all the people who were born blind together and showed them an elephant. And then he asked them, now what do you think an elephant is? So the ones who were shown the head of the elephant said, the elephant, Your Majesty, is a water jar. You get the connection? I haven't actually felt an elephant, but the head looks like a water jar. Anyway, the ones who shown the ears said it was a winnowing basket. Winnowing basket is for winnowing the chaff off the wheat and rice. Those who were shown the tusk said it was a plowshare. Those who were shown the trunk, it's a plow pole. Those who were shown the body said it's a storeroom. Getting really imaginative here. And the foot is a post. Anyway, the hindquarters are a mortar. Anyway, it goes on like this. And then these people who had all different opinions about the elephant, they all started arguing. No, the elephant is this. No, the elephant is that. And finally, they fell into fighting each other. And it was very delightful for the king to see all these people fighting over the elephant, which was totally different than everything they said. It was, ridiculous. I mean, it's a winnowing basket, right? Yeah, right. Anybody think of an elephant as a winnowing basket? No. So then there's a quotation here that says, a little verse, some recluses and Brahmins, so-called, are deeply attached to their own views. People who see only one side of things engage in quarrels and disputes. So he was trying to make fun of this, views and opinions. When you get it, they only saw part of it, only got part of the picture, and then they had all these views about it, you see. And they were even wrong, yeah. So then but the Buddha himself, he encouraged people to investigate. For example, the famous Kalama Sutta, right? What they call it, the discourse on, was it free inquiry or something or other? Something in the West anyway. Now look, you Kalamas, do not be led by oral sayings, tradition, or hearsay, nor by authority of scriptures, nor by reasoning or inference, nor by reasoned reflection, nor by accepting a view, nor because we respect some teacher. But when you know for yourself, these things are unskillful, these things are blameworthy, these things are censured by the wise, these things, if undertaken, lead to harm and suffering, then abandon them. So he was making a plea for people to have the direct investigation and find out for yourself, put it into practice. Not just believe, scriptures and hearsay and even teachers. Should I bow out now? I'm just putting forth things for you to investigate, not to tell you what to do. And then even though, the Buddha made light of views, pointed out the danger of them, especially holding to views, but he also recognized the value. Like I said, the views do have an effect on people's approach to life. So the Buddha instigated what he called right view. This was the right view, which could facilitate people's practice to realize awakening for themselves. Yeah. And the right view, there's mundane right view and there's super mundane right view. The mundane right view, I mean, there's various things which apply to the conditions in the Buddhist time, but he pointed out, I guess, like if I just summarize them, the most important part is that there is fruit and result of good and bad actions. Like some teachers thought there wasn't any. You can do good actions, it doesn't have any effect. That our happiness and suffering were just due to fate or happen chance or accident or something or other. But the Buddha said, no, that's a wrong view. The good and bad actions have effects, have results. Yeah. And there are people, the second one, most important maybe, is there are people in the world who are practicing the right path. So that, there is possibility, still alive, to keep practicing. And otherwise, we realize, this teaching was only for the Buddha, only for people 2,500 years ago, where the Buddha is trying to teach us a universal teaching available to anybody, anytime, any place. Then the supramundane right view, of course, is when we clearly understand the Four Noble Truths, clearly understand the real essence of the Buddhist teachings. Then you realize, that one of the stages of awakening. Then that's the mundane right view, the right view of somebody who's awakened. So it's not just a view; it is a clear confidence. They've seen it for themselves. And then we come to the specific views. I mean, the most comprehensive one, discussion of views, is called the Brahmajala Sutta, the first one of Digha Nikaya. Buddha goes to me, painstakingly through 62 different views, all kinds of complications. I mean, interesting enough though, 49, I think somebody told me, out of 62 came out of somebody's meditation practice, meditation experience, a bona fide meditation experience, but they drew the wrong conclusions of it. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, so watch your meditation. Don't draw any, preliminary conclusions about it. Just keep practicing till you see the light. And you can write, you can have an interview with the Ajahn, whether you got it right or not. And there's many aspects to right view. I mean, Buddha was also kind of pragmatic about his teaching, because he realized not only, that to avoid just believing in tradition and scriptures and hearsay, but even though it's hard to prove, for example, it's hard to prove that, sometimes it's hard to prove that good actions give positive results. Yeah. For example, I mean, pretty hard to determine whether if you do good actions, you get reborn after death in a favorable position, But when you look around, people who do good actions, even in this life, benefit. Right? Somebody who's generous and kind and does skillful things is respected in this life, and you notice they have lots of friends and people appreciate them. Where somebody does bad actions, I want to keep away from them, right? Yep. If they aren't locked up already. But when the Buddha realized that all these different views, all the 62 different views, he said they're all based on contact. It's like I'm trying to say about just because you have sense contact, you have a view. And when you understand the whole nature of contact, then you don't hold on to these views. Okay, you have meditation experience, it's only an experience, it's only a view for now. The more you keep practicing, your view changes. You have a different understanding, hopefully a better understanding, but the problem comes from holding on to it and saying, this is right. Like some of these teachers, they had experience, say, kind of very, very deep concentration, and they saw different worlds. They thought, oh, yeah, look at this. There is that world there. Like some people, they can astral travel or something or other. Then this is the whole purpose of the Buddhist teaching, and there is another astral plane there or something or other. And then that's where they stop practice. I'm going to be an astral traveler, rather than a meditator for awakening. Yes. And it has happened quite often. I went to a monastery in South Thailand, and all the monks were very busy making medicine. I thought, why are they all making medicine here? And apparently the Ajahn was very good at samadhi. He contacted some devas, apparently, some other beings somewhere, and they told him these special medicines, you see. And so he became a medicine monk. I mean, it's kind of hard to fault him in a way, because he gets medicines free, he wasn't charging for them, but his whole life was then now not about practicing for a liberation, but to make medicine to heal people, physically. So I mean, it's hard to fault him, but he's still missing the whole purpose of the monastic life, to be liberated from suffering completely, not just to heal your broken down body, you see. So I mean, it was a bit strange, but I mean, he had this gift, you see. But he stopped his practice there, see. And that was his whole purpose, was just to make medicine to heal people's physical ailments rather than their mental ones. Yeah. But the Buddha also recognized, even though right view is very important, but it's also, be careful you don't grasp it. So he gave also what they call the simile of the raft. Heard that one? Yeah. The Dhamma is to be used as a raft for crossing over, not for holding on to. The simile of the raft is that if somebody who's crossing a river, they build a raft to get to the other side. To get to the other side, they don't take the raft with them, right? They leave it there. Yeah. So the Dhamma it's a raft to take you across to the other shore. You don't grab onto it and hold it and identify with it. So even though, meditation practice and studying the scriptures and all that is beneficial, but don't grasp it. You use it the best you can till you get to the deeper understanding, and then move on from there. So there's different, views that come out of. I mean, for example, views about the nature of yourself. So, how many of you have looked at your views? Do you believe that you can be liberated, enlightened this lifetime? Don't be personal. I won't ask for a show of hands here. But some people have that view. Impossible. This is the Dharma ending age. You can't be enlightened or something or other, and that's going to affect your way of practice. But if you realize that there's a possibility. I mean, there is traditions in Thailand where there are enlightened masters still, in this day and age. Whether they are or not, I don't think really matters too much. But just the thought that there is a possibility that there's enlightened masters, that can, even though you yourself feel, because you look at your own defilements, you think, oh, hopeless case. But there are people who have practice. And if you read the story about some of their difficulties, like some of Ajahn Chah's difficulties when he was practicing, and I mean, sometimes my difficulties look small compared to his, he got over them, so maybe I might one day too. So, maybe I'm getting too old to jump too high, though. So then another level of views was called the 10 undeclared views. I mean, the Buddha didn't always give an answer to certain views either. There's 10 views which are pretty common. There was like the views I think that people would ask another teacher. Is the world eternal? Is the world not eternal? And then by the teacher's answer, you can get an idea what their view is, you see. Whether they're an eternalist or whatever. But the Buddha just refused to answer. And really frustrated some of the other people, because what's this guy believe anyway? Can't peg him down. But he said, I don't answer them because It's just the thicket of views, the wilderness of views, agitation of views, the writhing of views, the fetter of views, writhing of views, is connected with suffering, vexation, turmoil, and distress. Does not lead to disillusionment, to dispassion, to cessation, to calming, direct knowledge, to awakening, or nibbana. So, just thinking about, is the world eternal? Is the world not eternal? Just leads to vexation. How do you know? Yeah. So just put it aside. I don't know. And be able to acknowledge, I don't know, and I don't care either. Because it doesn't conduce to nibbana. Doesn't that take a big weight off your mind? Imagine if you had to consider, really, is the world eternal? Is it not eternal? No. What a headache, huh? With your limited view of things. Yeah? So when this Vacchagotta, who asked him these questions, and the Buddha responded, speculative views have been put away by the Tathagata, the Buddha, because he has seen directly. There's a little pun on the word view here, see? Vacchagotta was referring to the views and opinions, but the Buddha was referring to this word view, ditti, as how he sees things, the knowledge and experience. So the Buddha has directly seen the rising and passing away of the 5 groups of grasping. And because of that, seeing it as it is, then he has been liberated without grasping. Okay, so it's not a matter of trying to sort out these views, but investigating, these 5 groups of grasping, seeing their rising and the passing, arising and the passing. When you recognize how the body is coming into being and passing away every second, every millisecond, and you realize, oh, boy, that's how it is. If this body is arising, passing away, what about the eternal world? No problem. All views come to an end. And of course, there is, the 2 of the strongest views people have are whether you will live forever. You live after the death of the body, or you pass away and become worm food. You have a view about that? I don't know. Ask me after I die. If I can let you know, I will send you a postcard. But all of these views, they go back to identity view. Identity view is the view that there is a permanent abiding self that is going to live forever, is going to die, needs to be concerned about whether the world is eternal or not. Okay? But based upon this identity view, there is a self. If you begin to understand that this so-called sense of a self is just a changing, transitory, arising, passing away phenomena, then what's that? You can't have a view about it, can you? Can you have a view about something which is constantly changing? Because your view is constantly changing with the changing phenomena. So what kind of view can you have except it's changing? But because this identity view is so ingrained in self-referencing and the I-making process, just to know that isn't quite enough. So usually it takes what we call the opening of the eye of Dhamma, which is called then the realization of Sotapanna, the first stage of awakening. And there was a few instances in the scriptures where somebody came along and the Buddha recognized they're ready for it, and gave them a very comprehensive teaching, and they realized this eye of Dhamma right there. One of them was the General Siha. So when the Buddha realized his mind was ready for it, he gave him a graduated discourse on generosity, morality, the heaven realms. He explained the disadvantage in sensual pleasures, profit of it, renunciation. And when he knew that the mind of the general was receptive, pliable, free of hindrances, uplifted, and trusting, he explained the Dhamma teaching of the Buddha, dukkha, its origin, its cessation, and path. So he was already very open to the Buddha's teaching about generosity and morality, etc. And then the Buddha realized, oh, he's ready for the real nitty gritty, the real stuff. He's ready for dukkha, which a lot of people aren't ready for, you know. One of my first times in the West, somebody asked me, you know, what's the Buddha's teaching anyway? I thought, aha, my first sermon, you know. First time I was in the West after 7 years in Thailand, you see. So immediately I said, oh, you know, Buddha's teaching that life is dukkha. And that person says, I didn't use the word pali, but I said, life is suffering. The person said, I'm not suffering. End of first sermon. This person's not quite ready for it. I should talk about generosity and morality first. But interesting enough, a few days later, this person came back and I just happened to mention, I said, if you aren't suffering, why can't you just sit quietly for a few minutes? They're constantly busy, doing things all the time. Couldn't sit still for a minute. And I said, well, if you're really not suffering, why can't you just sit there quietly? She looked up at me and says, I'm suffering. So she was contemplating it, you know, this whole time. And what does that mean, suffering? Nobody ever mentioned it to her, probably, you know. But just at that time, the young child of one of her colleagues at work had drowned in the ocean. And she went to the funeral, and of course the coffin is this big. So she got a real shock. So she was ready for it, you know. So anyway, that was the opening. My first sermon was not quite the same as the Buddha. But had effect, obviously had an effect of some kind. So after this, what he saw was, his vision of Dhamma was, whatever is of a nature to arise, all that is of nature to cease. Yeah. Arising and ceasing, everything is that way. Yeah. But most of us, we don't want to look at the ceasing, do we? We look at the arising. And then when things cease, we kind of ignore it, but we suffer. Oh no, that's not fair, that's not right. I don't want to see that. Give me something nice to arise. But because his mind was so receptive, they say, just as a clean cloth free of stain would readily receive dye, so the mind of Sikha the General, as he sat there, realized, oh, the undefiled, stainless vision of Dhamma arose. Everything arises and ceases. Nothing is permanent. And then he was awakened to the first level of awakening. And he attained self-confidence and became independent of others in the teacher's dispensation. So, you know, he realized for himself. So I say he was independent of others. He knew himself. He didn't have to, what's the teaching again? What do I have to do again? He knew already what the path of practice was. So that's what they call the level of Sotapanna. So he'd gone beyond any kind of doubt. He'd seen through identity view. You know, if before you believed there was a self which is permanent, to be eternal or pass away, whatever, then be destroyed. Then you realize it's just rising and passing. Then, oh, nothing is eternal. So you penetrate through identity view. There's no identity there to have a view of. So no point having a view of anything. So you can you can be much more flexible. You just abide with the way things really are rather than have to hold on to some fixed view then. When one sees the rising and passing away, with right wisdom, as it really is with right wisdom, there are no more views about the past, the future, no more vigorous holding. So when there's no more holding on to views, then the mind is liberated from the outflows without grasping. End. Well, not the end yet. It's only Sotapanna, not Arahant yet. We got 4 more chapters yet to go yet. End of this session. So So this is cessation of self-views. So there's the cessation of identity, and then I am, and underlying dispositions yet. But as opposed to the arising, the making of self, which is kind of a developmental process, sometimes the liberation process goes quite quickly. Like some people, they they realize sotapanna, level of sotapanna. Others quickly realize arahant. They have much more deeper insights into the very basics of I am arising or whatever. So not just particular stages necessarily, but generally people go in stages. Their mind is opening slowly, first level, and then they realize they gain some confidence with the practice, back to it again, and the deeper level, deeper levels. So this is a good foundation anyway. Yeah, Sotapanna, a good foundation to work from. Yeah. So stay tuned for the rest of it. You got a few weeks to work on this one, because now there's a pause when I go on retreat for 2 weeks. No. This is the last one for 2 weeks. Yeah. Yep. So it'll give you time to work on Sotapanna practice. Yeah, okay, yeah.
What happens if we make it in 1 week?
Well, then you can enjoy the fruit for the next week. There's Magga and Pala, you see. Yeah. There's path and the fruit of the practice. Yeah.